You're listening to Coding Blocks, Episode 12. Subscribe to us and leave us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, and more using your favorite podcast app.
Visit us at codingblocks.net where you can find show notes, examples, discussion, and more.
And send your feedback, questions, and rants to comments at codingblocks.net and follow us on Twitter at codingblocks and on Facebook at facebook.com/codingblocks. And with that, welcome to Coding Blocks. I'm back with my voice. I'm Alan Underwood.
I'm Joe Zach.
And I'm Michael Outlaw. And today's going to be just a water cooler discussion.
Yeah, we've been talking a little bit about a few things, kind of what we want to be when we grow up and what life's like for new developers.
Whoa. I'm not growing up.
Oh.
I refuse to grow up.
It's nice to dream, isn't it?
What?
Like my wife's grandma she once said, I didn't plan on mentioning this, but my wife had asked for something and her grandma told her that it was good to want things.
Nice.
Is this like the people in hell want ice water?
Sounds about right.
Doesn't mean they get it.
Yeah,
Something like that.
it's good to want things.
Yep.
Yeah.
So with that, we have some podcast news today. What we got?
Yeah, first off, I mentioned an article on the last post, our last episode, about signing packages in NuGet and kind of what to do with your keys and how it's a pain for open source. And got some really nice comments from Peter and Vlad. And you can check that out on the blog post. We'll have a link to it. But basically, they both told me the same thing, which was, of course, you have to use the same key. Yeah. So my little strategy there of just generating a new one every time definitely loses the authenticity factor. So not such a great idea, but hey, you live, you learn. And also, I wanted to mention the SwedishCoder.net. This is a guy we've mentioned on the podcast before, Patrick Dahlen, and he is actually getting really close to having listened to 365 podcasts. And if you go to his blog and kind of scroll through, you'll get to see he's actually written notes on each one. And I thought this was really cool because that's a lot of time. When you think about 360, generally an hour worth, I don't even know how many weeks that is, but that's a lot of time to really invest in yourself. And I thought that was really cool that he actually took the time to write up the notes about it. And so we probably actually remember some of the stuff that he learned.
Yeah, I think that might be the more noteworthy part of it is to take the notes about it.
Yeah, I mean, he writes a decent little post about each one of them. And
Can you imagine
there's
writing
some
a
good
note
stuff
for every show you listen to?
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, the cool thing is I went up there and was looking at them, and he's got some good references, so I'm going to go check out some of these as well. So.
Yeah, I think Scott Hanselman's actually talked before about writing a blog so that he can Google himself later. Be like, oh, what's that cool thing I was looking at last month or 2 years ago, and just kind of Google it and find it. There you go.
So inspiration for some of you guys out there. And also, we want to send out some thanks to Trent Apple at Trent Apple on Twitter. And you can find him at www.trentapple.com. He actually left us a review on iTunes, a 5-star review, as did Brock as well. Appreciate both of those. Super appreciate them. And another little piece of news that came out.
I always get stuff about a cool last name. But you got to admit, like, into this day and age for technology, that guy's got a pretty good announced name.
Yeah. Apple's right up there, right?
That's not one you forget.
No.
Now, it would really suck for him if he hates, like, Apple products.
Yeah, I mean, 3 .NET guys here sitting with Apple computers, so that tells you a little bit of something.
That's true.
Yeah, so...
well, as soon as they start making Outlaw computers, then maybe I'll focus on that.
So with the last piece of news I have for the week, it's Telerik came out with a new thing called NativeScript, which is a cross-platform mobile development JavaScript type language. So Telerik is pushing these things out. I don't know when it's actually going live, but we have a link to it, so you can check that out. Yet another cross-platform mobile development framework.
And also in other news, the Reflection of Control article, I posted that out to Reddit and got some interesting feedback on both Reddit and on the site on codingblocks.net. Some interesting feedback. Some people pointing out MEF or the service locator pattern.
So it's kind of similar ways of solving the problem, but MEF is heavy, man, and I don't know anyone who's ever enjoyed working with it.
Yeah, I mean, there were some of the guys, the feedback, there were guys who did and guys who voiced opinions similar to yours. So,
it's good to hear both sides of it.
So, moving right along.
We're on to our show topic.
I don't want to grow up, though. Should we be singing like a Toys R Us song?
Well, how did you guys get into programming? Like, anyway, when you started thinking about working in this field, like, what did you want to be?
Oh, man. I started programming, I think, in high school because I had a little TRS-80.
So video games is what you're saying.
No, it wasn't video games. It was actually, we had these. I was taking algebra or whatever age I was in. And I was like, oh, this makes sense. So I can write a little program that I can just plug in some numbers and it'll do my homework for me. Fantastic.
Nice.
So that's how it started. But like getting into it in the real world, it was literally we had some inefficient processes at a job I was working at. I was like, I think we can automate these. And so I took something that took typically about 8 hours of a person's time in a day and dropped it down to about a minute. Mm-hmm. So, it was one of those, you see something, there's got to be a better way, right?
Yeah. Well, for me, it was definitely video games. World Cup's going on right now. My wife was talking about how she didn't recognize some of the flags. I was like, yo, Carmen Sandiego. Suspect flew off in a plane flying a green and white flag. Go to Morocco.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, man, that was fun times.
Yep.
No.
I love that. And Nintendo. And there was a lot of stuff around then. My parents were both teachers, and we used to check out like an Apple II and take it home for the summer. And I got to kind of play around and learn on that. And that was really cool.
So because I'm so young, it's hard to believe that I would understand this reference. But totally war games.
Oh, absolutely.
Maybe.
That didn't really inspire me. I was a kid at that point.
Yeah, I wasn't born yet, so it was kind of like I saw that movie on like Netflix.
Right.
But
Yeah, Michael's still 21.
yeah, it's
Yes.
weird.
Yeah.
So one of the things we first wanted to talk about was this whole idea that I actually heard on a MacBreak podcast recently where they just kind of lobbed this out there like, hey, shouldn't people almost just consider using JavaScript as a first language now? And I heard that, and I think I like twitched a few times, and then I was like, well, wait a second. This has a lot of merit to it.
Yeah, F12, and you've got it right there, right?
Yeah, you got a free browser that you can use. It's got, WebKit's got all these tools in it to be able to debug this stuff. You don't really need a lot to get going. And today,
totally. If you want to learn how to do things wrong, yeah, you should totally pick up JavaScript.
Well,
as your first language.
Okay, so in fairness, it's loosey goosey, right? Like there's no typing, there's none of that. Like you can kind of cheat it in some places, but realistically, so check this out. Like one of the things that kind of makes a lot of sense is you have things like PhoneGap, you have Appcelerator / Titanium, you have like Swift apparently is following the same type of syntax. Obviously, it's going to be a little bit different, but you have all these things that right now, if you just really want to spend some time doing some JavaScript, you could literally deploy out to Android, iOS, Windows Phone.
You forgot NativeScript that you mentioned earlier.
NativeScript, which is going to be a JavaScript only thing.
TypeScript.
Now you've got Node.js, which is a server-side JavaScript.
Hey, welcome to learning 1,000 different modules that you'll have to use.
It's insane.
Yeah, buying even Windows apps now, like the Windows 8 apps, it's crazy. Unity, to make 3D games in JavaScript.
So just one of those things I wanted to toss out because, I'm personally am a fan of JavaScript because of what you can do with it. I'm not in love with the language by any means, but there is a lot of things that you could do and do well just knowing JavaScript and nothing else.
I have such mixed feelings about JavaScript because on the one hand, I don't like it because it's a lot of the things that I don't like. Like you mentioned it being loosey-goosey. That's one of the things I don't like about it. I am a fan of like the typed languages. I like the structure being there. And so JavaScript not having that, it's kind of like, whoa, wait a minute. We got to have some rules about how we do this, right? But at the same time, it is so wildly popular. It is so fast. It does do things incredibly well that it does make me want to do more of it and do it well. But it's not my preference.
Well, I'll say this. So I just recently, and I know I'm way behind the curve on this one, but I just recently started messing with Node.js. And the other day...
it's totally been replaced by like 3 times.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, that's like, 2 years old now.
Yeah.
But, I took Node.js, Yeoman, and was able to scaffold up
now
an
there's
Angular...
edon.js.
Oh, my God. It's ridiculous. But I was able to scaffold up an application. And, seriously, it took me less than 20 minutes to scaffold an entire application using Yeoman Node and some base install packages. And it's done. So I know... there's obviously a place for JavaScript. It's not going anywhere. HTML5 was trying to be the answer to a lot of things. But JavaScript is here for a long time to stay, and it's just growing.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's definitely okay. So I remember, a few years back, Perl was often called like the duct tape of the internet, right? But I think that has definitely now JavaScript has definitely owned that one now. So I agree, it's definitely not going anywhere, and there are some things that it does fantastic, but it feels like you can't even use it successfully if you're not using some other package.
Agreed. You need to be investing in libraries, some third-party library, in order to make it worthwhile. Nobody should be writing it. Other than learning purposes, I will say, nobody should be writing JavaScript code from scratch to do much of anything, unless they are trying to build a library. Because at this point, you've got all these cross-browser compatibility issues and all that kind of stuff, unless we're talking about server-side type stuff.
But that's the kind of it. But I guess at its core, that's part of what bothers me about it, though. Because you like, name another language that you would say that about. Crickets.
No, I don't know. I mean, so I'll say this: like, even in Java, one of the things, and we're going to go further into this later, but one of the things about Java that drove me crazy is there were all these frameworks and libraries, and so it's the same type. It's the same type thing. Yes, you can do a lot.
Those
with
totally. I see where you're wanting to go with that. Okay, so let's just call out like Spring as a prime example, right?
Right.
But I view that separately, though. That is like a practice that Java developers, the Java community has picked up on and carried on with. But you can still, without Spring, write good Java code, which might sound like an oxymoron to some, without a problem.
Now with an IDE, the IDEs are so built around like Maven or other build tools now.
Right.
It's hard to just kind of Notepad and JVac it.
Well, now, okay. I mean, if we're going to go talking into Java now, like we go into a whole different.
No, but I mean, I guess that's where I'm getting is you can say the same thing with most any language. If you want to get the most out of the languages, you're going to be using third-party things. Like
the most out of it, I would absolutely agree with that. So, like, you wouldn't do .NET, you wouldn't use, you wouldn't roll your own logging.
Correct.
In .NET, you'd use a log for .NET or an equivalent in Java. Log for J. You wouldn't. Yeah, I'm 100% on you. I agree with you on that. Like a Newtonsoft for JSON. Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. You would, more often than not, you're not going to roll your own. But what I'm saying, though, is like with JavaScript, it seems like the default is you're not even writing pure JavaScript 9 times out of 10. You're using jQuery, or you're at a minimum, you're using some other third party.
But jQuery is more like a bolt-on, though. Like, it's just an extension to the language, as opposed to...
Well, can you say that about any of them?
You could say that about Groovy in Java.
But you got to go, like, if you go Angular, you got to go Angular all in. There's no sprinkling it here and there.
Yeah, I totally agree there. There's definitely some packages where you're all in.
But let's get back to just the JavaScript portion of it. Another couple of examples that I have, like, if you want to write a Chrome plugin, you can pretty much do it in JavaScript, right? And now Chrome OS is big, and you can pretty much do the same type things that will go cross application type stuff.
It does make me wonder though too, though, like if some of its performance is just because, like, so the very thing that I like about like a C#, for example, the structure, the typed language aspect of it, makes me wonder if the fact that that's not there in JavaScript is the reason why it performs so fast and so well, because it is smaller.
Maybe. I would think it would actually be slower, though, because anytime you're doing conversions or anything, like, it's having to figure things out behind the scenes, right? Like, anytime you do a plus, it's going to assume concatenation, unless you're telling it to do a parse float or parse int. So it seems like it would be slower and more memory inefficient than anything else. So
that's a good point.
But the thing is the engines behind it have gotten so fast. Like Google's, what is it? Something
V8?
V8 is just incredibly fast, which is what Node.js runs off of. And apparently they're even improving upon that more. So
yeah, even within Firefox, there's like a standard set of library calls that if you use that, then it can compile it down into native code. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely, it's like a necessary evil.
I don't see it as an evil. I like it. My biggest problem is it's so fragmented right now. because there's so many JS libraries out there, and picking one is literally like sticking your flag in the ground and saying, "This is what I'm doing."
But this goes exactly to your Java point, though. You were talking about so many different frameworks and packages in
Yep.
Java. JavaScript is now. Hold on, JavaScript
it's on a whole
is
nother
way
level.
worse.
Yeah, it's on a whole nother level. It's
way worse.
frustrating.
You can't even go 3 weeks without a new library coming out. It's like, oh man, you're still using that one? No, we've totally moved on.
And they all define the $sign.
Yeah, I mean, you've got Durandal, you've got AngularJS, Ember.js, you got Handlebars, Knockout, Boot. I mean, there's just Backbone. There's so many, and picking them is mind-numbing. But from just a pure learning perspective, I have to say what they threw out on Mac
language, though.
But on a first, because here's the thing, you can cheat OO in JavaScript, and several of the frameworks do that for you. And so you can learn basic concepts. Granted, you're flying without any kind of safety net because there
Like
is no,
interfaces.
yeah, you don't really have interfaces, but they actually cheat things, right, in various different libraries. But
this goes back to your point, though, from our last episode, Joe, where one of the complaints about things like these patterns are the lack of functionality in the languages, and
Yeah, they're just making up for deficiencies in C# and Java.
Yeah,
so
or
you
you
don't
could
need
say it
that
better
crap
like
in
that.
JavaScript.
yeah, and that's the whole thing. I guess that's the beauty of JavaScript is people have built it in there because they miss it or because they want to use it in a particular way. But JavaScript's main purpose is to get things done, right? Like it's almost like you throw the craftsman stuff out of the water, which you don't have to, by the way, especially if you're using frameworks. But if you boil it down to nuts and bolts, you can do a lot of stuff with that little language. And that's the thing about it. It's fairly simple, right? I mean, if
made
you
in 10 days.
Well, until it gets big. Now, if you're looking at working on a big project, you can't F12, find definition, go to usages, none of that stuff.
no, you can.
I mean, a little bit.
You
Kind of.
can.
It's so easy to slip stuff into global, though. So if you do it correctly, all right. But if you don't, and that's why it kind of scares me a little bit as a first language, because you can do stuff really in the wrong way. You can do the bad parts of JavaScript.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It's definitely an interesting topic. I mean, it really got my curiosity when they said that because it can be the backbone for doing things like this new Swift language that came out from Apple, which is very intriguing. I mean, this language runs faster than their native Objective-C, but it's very much like a scripting type language. So it's an interesting concept to start with that because it's easy to pick up. And here's the thing, you'll pick up some bad habits, but over time, I mean, how many of us ever started out programming perfectly, right?
Oh, gosh.
We all started out with bad habits.
6 months ago.
Well, I think Joe kind of hinted on this because there's a good book that I know that I've read. I think Joe might have read it. I'm not sure if you've
Actually
read it
read
yet.
it, yep.
I've gone through it
It's
a little bit.
a good O'Reilly book that if you haven't already checked out, you should, called JavaScript: The Good Parts. It's by Douglas Crockford, and it's a really good book, and it calls out like things that you should do in JavaScript and things that you should avoid doing in JavaScript.
Yeah, there's a funny picture where it's got the good parts lay on top of JavaScript, like the entire language, and the good parts is a very tiny book compared to the full-on JavaScript book.
And while
But it's crazy that you got to have that book, though.
Yeah.
well, but I mean, come on, there's bad parts to every language. I mean, in all honesty, there's stuff that you should avoid. Most
Equal.
Yeah. Equal is pretty nasty.
I like equal.
Not in JavaScript, you don't.
Why not?
You know what?
Why don't you like it?
Okay,
You're supposed to
clearly
use
you
triple
didn't
equal.
read the
You're
book.
supposed to use triple equal. But
Yes.
Yeah, because
Yes.
it does this weird coercion kind of stuff that has
who
really
cares?
weird results.
Equal equals fine.
No, don't say it. Don't say him that. Don't tell him that.
But here's what I will say. I mean, even though we're
I
doing
can't even get it out.
even though we're doing a fireside chat, I do want to throw something out there for anybody doing JavaScript. If you're doing things at a page level, like putting function and then, my function on a page, you need to get away from that completely.
Scope.
Yes, scope it. If you were going to put methods or anything on a page, put it inside its own scope. So create, my page equal and then an object and put all your functions in that. Don't have it on the page because then it's global. And if there are includes coming from other pages or modules that are on that same page, you're likely going to run into collisions and overwrite your own functions. So
Globals are bad.
yeah, just avoid global functions in JavaScript. It's a bad idea.
So, if you had to develop a language, right?
Mm-hmm.
It'd take some time, right? There's a lot to be done there. Like, how long do you think that it took to create JavaScript?
At least, a
First
day-
version,
a day or two.
a day or two, really? Oh, you're aggressive, man.
I'm totally kidding. Yeah, I mean, it's just because I work fast.
I mean, most people it would probably take months, but me personally, like 2 days.
Yeah. I'm there.
Really?
Yeah.
You guys are putting that out there on the record.
If I recall Wikipedia, I think it's a week.
Yeah. Outlaw's got the number. He's just dangling this carrot out there. Go
Well,
ahead.
I was hoping to get an answer from you, but yeah, it was 10 days.
10.
That really is insane.
Yeah. I mean, that's fast. But really, again,
And I'm not sure how. I know I'm going to butcher his. Man, I should not
Brandon
talk about
Ike?
names. Yes, Brendan. Yeah, he was tasked with developing it and did it in 10 days.
I mean, here's the thing. Really, at the heart of it, where it started, it was a very simple language.
Yeah,
I mean, and it's come a long ways. Like, it does a lot more than JavaScript was never intended to grow the 80 heads that it has. I don't believe. But it just turned into, when DHTML took off, it turned into what, people turned to.
well, that's the problem with duct tape. You end up overusing it.
But it's not duct tape. It's actually a fairly
You
decent-
forget that there's gaffer's tape
I
that
like
you
it.
should use.
I like it.
And instead you use the duct tape because it's everywhere and it's quick and available and it works about as good.
And you got duct tape on your duct tape, and then it just all comes off.
But that's where the frameworks come in, and they help you unduct tape yourself.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But so what do you guys think of the original question? What do you think about JavaScript as a first language? Good idea?
I
See, I feel like someone coming out of college, if they ask me, they're thinking, I'm really going to dive in on JavaScript, and I think that's a good idea. I'd have to say, yeah, I think there's certainly enough momentum in the industry. I don't think you'd be wasting your time.
I'll put it this way. I wouldn't even care so much as whether you're going server side or client side. If you want to do Node.js, I'd say absolutely. If you wanted to go client side, I'd say pick one of the popular frameworks like Angular, because you won't be hungry for a long time. So that I would say that it's definitely not a bad choice to get familiar with.
Well, okay, wait a minute. Are we talking about this from the point of view of, telling somebody from like marketability, or are we talking about this from the point of view of like a school trying to put together a curriculum in what should they
No.
use?
I'm talking about
Because
earning.
when we said like, teaching it as a first language, I thought we meant at like a school level, which they typically don't care about marketability so much.
No, I would not say Scholastic has anything to do with it. I would say from a marketability and being able to get yourself out there and market yourself to work on projects, right?
Yeah, great first language.
Yes, I think it's perfect for
I
that.
can stand behind that, but let's go to my take
Conceptual,
on it, which was
no.
like
How much
from
you
a
want to hate your
school,
life.
from a classroom perspective. Should it be the language of choice for teaching purposes?
No, absolutely not.
No.
I still
Scheme.
think which one?
Scheme.
I
Structures and something in computer programming.
still think that C++ was excellent for that, simply from the concept that you actually had to care about memory and all that, whereas Java was a better OO type, because I mean it was like the granddaddy of it all.
Yeah, but OO is kind of over now, right? We're on the functional.
Yeah, I mean that does seem to be a hot topic nowadays.
Yep.
But I definitely say, from a scholarly position, JavaScript should not be your baseline. If you want to start working on projects, it could be something that gets you into a position somewhere fairly quick.
Yeah, I feel like JavaScript is great for rapid development, but not something you want to be maintaining a giant legacy JavaScript app. No way.
It depends on how well it's written.
Well, yeah.
Have you ever seen one?
Yeah. No,
The
I've
problem,
written some.
the
Yeah.
problem is in 4 weeks your app is about to be legacy code.
Yeah.
So-
Well, that's pretty much everything nowadays. So, yeah.
All right, well,
so hopefully
I feel like we beat up JavaScript. I mean, don't get me wrong. I like it, but
I like what you can do with it.
yeah.
and there are some things that some people do that it's just flat out amazing. And I'm like, wow, I can't believe you did that in JavaScript, but you pulled that off quite nicely.
Yeah. Oh, so speaking of that, one of the ones that people should check out that is fairly new, I think it's famo.us.
Well, God, I hope it is now.
Yeah. So there's a new JavaScript library that came out that's like
Just
all about
like this hour.
within the past month, I believe.
That's not new then.
They've been working on it for like a year, but it's insane. It's all about 3D rendering using JavaScript, which scares me to death. But it's actually really cool. If you look at the demos, like some of the stuff that they're doing with it is beautiful. So that's one to look at. And, of course, AngularJS is huge. And we mentioned some of the other ones. So, all right. Yes, we have now obliterated JS.
Murdered JavaScript.
Hey, while we got your
Rest in
attention,
peace.
I want to remind you to leave us a review on iTunes. We really appreciate it. And thanks to Trent and Brock for doing that this time. So we really appreciate that and lets us know how we're doing and what we need to improve on.
Yeah, and seriously, if there is something you'd like for us to improve on, please drop us a comment at comments@codingblocks.net or go up to our site and hit the Contact Us button and fill that out.
And you know what? If you do us the favor of giving us some feedback, we'll return the favor. Drop us a line, and we'll be sure to mention you.
Yeah, tell us your preferred mention, a shout-out, and we'll drop you some time on the show.
Yeah, so it sounds like we all kind of agree that JavaScript sucks. So
No.
Yeah, I thought that was the takeaway.
Yeah, these two guys.
yeah. But so if you were kind of going for like a traditional kind of OO language like C# or Java, then how do you know which one to pick and how do you really get started with that nowadays?
All right, so
C#.
just so you guys know, we actually restrained ourselves from talking about this before the show because we wanted to really get these ideas out there because, like, you could see all of us like, no, I can't say anything right now.
Do we put on the gloves now and like duke this out?
Well, I mean, the answer is clearly Java, right? It's open source. It's got a huge community. And if you
What?
didn't know
No.
any better, if
No.
you didn't know the sweet, sugary kisses that C# will give you, then you would probably be fine with Java your entire life.
Okay, so this was. Let me put some background to this. This was kind of spurred by there was a Reddit article that was in both the C# subreddit and in the Java subreddit. Why pick C# over Java and then why pick Java over C#? And that's what kind of got me thinking about this when I saw this because there was actually a lot of there wasn't as much hating as I thought that there might be. But there was some good, interesting information out there, and it was more along the lines of, if someone who is getting into this, from the start, and they didn't pick JavaScript, then, and they had decided on, okay, it's one of these two languages that I want to focus my career path on. Which one should I go down? Right, C# or Java?
So what would be your decision, your deciding factors, not your decision. We know what your decision is, but what would drive you?
So Joe, okay, so it is interesting because we haven't talked about this already, and he already hinted on something, and that was the sweet, sugary goodness that is C#. Mm-hmm. So if you were already ignorant to that, right, and I don't mean that in a rude way, but if you just didn't know
You
about
haven't
it,
coded in it, right?
then I would have to recommend Java.
Yeah.
Because there's a large community for it. There's a plethora of jobs for it. All kinds of different platforms that you can be on. From both a developer point of view, you could develop in Windows or Linux or Mac, but from a target point of view, your application could run on a multitude of targets.
Android.
Yeah, so it's like
Not the
yeah.
same app.
So,
but
so
Right.
well, no. But what I
Right.
mean though is that like you can, depending on what you're writing, you could target multiple platforms. For whatever the purpose might be,
with the same skill set.
with that same skill set. But also the Java community as a whole, though there are what would you call them? Like
Fanatics.
no. Well, there are those, but I meant like programming good practices that the Java community is far more entrenched to
Oh, no
than
doubt.
like a .NET community, for example.
AOP, dependency
Like,
injection. These things
yeah.
are like
we
second
brought
nature.
up Spring, a moment ago. Like that's a no-brainer
It's
on a
the
Java
de facto,
project.
yeah.
But yet in a C# project, it's like, whoa, wait a minute, you want to do what?
Yeah.
Even unit testing. Microsoft started pushing unit testing just a few years ago, and Java guys were like, "What? What do you guys do before that?"
Yeah,
So-
that's
What?
cute.
So if you were just starting out, then I would say, yeah, go ahead and pick up, start with Java and pick up a IntelliJ or whatever you want to use. But because the problem is going to be
For free.
once you start using something like a Visual Studio, right? that does have all the sugary goodness as Joe put it in. Plus, combined with a language that like C# that has a slew of syntactic sugar just built into it.
It's elegant.
It is like, oh my God, it's like crack cocaine. You cannot stop.
Yep.
So let me put my twist on what you just said as far as how I would choose this. And mine, again, comes from more of the marketability side of things. So we live in the Atlanta area. If it were me, I would be looking at the job boards to find out, hey, what are people looking for? And this is just purely not even looking at the language. This is saying, okay, if I invest my time in mastering one of these two technologies, which one is going to see that I have food on my table, right? And in the Atlanta area, fortunately, there's good of both. I would say that Java's probably a little bit more in demand in the Atlanta area, but it's not such a disparity to where you're going to be having problems finding something to do. So that would be my first thing. The next thing that actually did drive me more towards .NET versus Java was, while there are these fundamental things that they almost take for granted, like Spring and that, what was infuriatingly frustrating for me was when I was first looking in doing Java, like I would look, hey, what should I use, this or that? And there were nothing, it seemed like there were no fewer than 20 different answers, and just flame wars broke out on all of them. And so it was like, okay, in .NET you pretty much have, or in C# we'll say, you have a couple of ways that are pretty much standard that you do things. Like, if you're doing a web app, you have web forms and MVC. That's it. Like, you don't really think about it much. You don't have all these extra things stacked on top. And if you're looking for an ORM, you got, in Java you have in Hibernate, you have this MyBatis stuff. You have all these different options. In .NET, what have you got? You got Entity Framework. Like, you don't really have to look far for those extra things that you want to do. And it seemed like it was more of a standard. And that was one of the things that was really nice for me, is I didn't have to worry myself about, am I investing in this technology that is going to phase out next month, versus in .NET it was like, hey, this is standard practice. This is what everybody uses. Just go for it. So those two things for me really were key in both marketability and ability to just ease myself into the language, because everything was already kind of standardized.
I do feel like we should point out, though, that before you get a bunch of hate mail, in Hibernate it's actually .NET technology.
I meant Hibernate. I'm sorry, not in Hibernate. Jeez, that's what.
Otherwise, the hate mail. Send your hate mail to.
Yeah, no, Hibernate, MyBatis. There were several other ones. And don't get me wrong, there's a few ORMs in .NET, but pretty much if you talk to anybody, it's Entity. So. That was kind of my take on it. Was,
well, I mean, and even you mentioned like MyBatis. I mean, that exists for .NET. There's a .NET port as well, and that's the thing. A lot of Java technologies, there are similar or competing technologies, or even just straight up ports,
right,
of it, but they're just not as widely adopted.
Yeah, there's more of a defined
in the .NET community.
Right, there's more of a you can see this path in front of you, and you know that path is one you're going to take, because that's what the standards are. So that's kind of interesting. But the other thing is, again, like you guys that Joe brought up, is once you start programming in C#, some of the niceties in that language they really captivate you. And then Visual Studio, in my opinion, is probably the best IDE that's ever been created.
Yeah, ever. What's your take on this, Joe?
Yeah, I can't go back now. I'm stuck on C#, but if I was starting over again, I think I would probably go Java, realistically.
For what reasons?
I mean,
just it's open source, it's prolific. Android's huge right now, and even from marketability, you think like Google, IBM, Oracle's what I was looking for, even Amazon. Like, these are big Java shops. Like, Java's not going anywhere, and C# is Microsoft and everybody who uses Microsoft.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 100% on board with you. But there's just so many. It's the little things that start to add up over time. So, like, even okay. So, like, I brought up IntelliJ as an example, right? Like, in the Java world, if you have a bunch of unit tests let me go back. If you're in Visual Studio and you have a bunch of unit tests, you can very easily just run the single unit test that you're working on and trying to, verify or debug or whatever it might be. But in the Java world, if you're like in a Gradle project, you're running everything in that module before and you might only want to run the one test in that module. It's things like that that just frustrate me.
A little lack of polish, maybe.
There's a total lack of polish.
Yeah.
But yet it makes up for it because there's just so much, of it everywhere.
Well, I will say one thing with Java is because it has been around longer, there are people that have built things on top of it, like Groovy. I've taken a look at Groovy recently, and a lot of the syntactic sugar that we like in C#, they pretty much made available in Groovy. Like, it's a very truncated or a very shorthand form of being able to code the same type stuff.
Well, yeah, you're referring to like the Project Coin pieces, where they've like made languages on top of the
Yeah.
Like Scala's huge, Clojure.
yeah.
You can
Yeah.
run JavaScript on Java.
Yeah, so they've got a lot of stuff there,
JVM.
and again, there's no hating on it, but there are just so many, not like Link.
Well, I mean, I do like to make my Java jokes.
Yeah,
every now and then.
But I mean, seriously, after using Link, would you ever want to not have to use Link?
No.
Yeah, I mean, we did a whole episode on it. That's how much we like
that's
it.
my thing though. Like in terms of like syntactic sugar though, that's what I'm saying. Like you get so spoiled in C#.NET and Visual Studio, auto properties.
Yeah, absolutely.
That one will spoil you.
Yeah, and I think in
VAR.
C# now, I have to translate that to whatever language I'm working in. It wasn't my first language, but now it's the one that I, think and dream in.
It's
Imagine life without VAR.
No.
yeah, it's
But if I was recommending it to somebody who is just starting out, Java would be the one.
I don't know. Like I said, it would depend on. To me, I would say, hey, look at where you want to be and what's available in that area.
Listen, you don't start your drug habit with heroin. You start with an entry level like marijuana, and you work your
Wow.
way up to the heroin.
Wow, there goes the PG-13 rating.
Yep, it's all off.
Like instructions on how to get addicted to drugs.
Go ahead and slap the explicit tag on this. Excellent.
Well, so what if you do want to switch it up, though? What if you want to, cross over to the other side? Or, C# and Java are pretty similar, but what if you are really into Go and you're like, I want to start working in Go now, or I want to start working in JavaScript. Like, how do you do that?
You know what? One of the things that I've always said is, people say, yeah, you got to get a book. Okay, first you got to have a reference book, right? We all have them. But you're not going to learn how to do things with a reference book.
No, you got to do it and fail and fail
Exactly.
and
And honestly, one of my favorite ways of learning more advanced ways of programming is to pull down an open source project. I mean, if you really want to learn how people are doing things and doing things in a scalable way, typically speaking, not all of them will be, but pull down somebody else's code where there's, 200 developers working on it. Because if it's bad, it's going to get really bad. But if you find one that's popular, then you should be able to see some good structure and find out how people are actually coding things. Open source is a great way to get your feet wet in any kind of language.
But to recommend someone who's just starting out a language like Go, though?
I don't know about Go.
I mean, I'm not saying I'm not trying to dog on it, but it's a little early to see, how well that's going to go over.
Yeah, it was nice to see, like, how do they set up their folders?
Yeah.
How do they set up their, Go's not a great example. They have kind of conventions for a lot of stuff like that. Even Angular has a lot of conventions, but just getting started on the little things like that can be a real speed bump for people who are used to programming and just want to kind of get going.
Yeah, honestly, that's one of the big frustrations when trying to pick up a new library language or whatever is what Joe just said with the folder structure. I mean, that can be maddening. It seems so trivial, but you'll see all these tutorials on how to...
You don't like that in Java you have to have 20 nested folders before you get to the file?
No.
Here we go.
And you don't want to look like an idiot by not having that either.
But
Yeah, man.
But
You
I
gotta
mean,
have your com.net.org company name www mypackage
but
this is
we
what it does refactor.org
but we've all seen these tutorials where they teach you how to do something, right? And then you're like, well, where do I put that?
Yeah.
Like, does this go in the same file or is this in the same folder? Wait, is this the same package? Where does this go? So that's why I say, like, open source projects, a lot of times if you can find one that's got that's got some decent traction. Now, I'm not talking it has 2 developers on it all doing things however they want. If you can pull that down, look at the structure, see how they're laying things out, and use a good IDE to be able to navigate through with the thing, you can pick up a lot of tips that way. And it's a good way to learn the language and learn how to avoid pitfalls that you would have done starting out.
I bet user groups is really good too for new languages. You just kind of show up and see what they have to say, and if you do start some sort of side project or something, you can kind of probably show somebody there and be like, all right, how bad did I do?
I would say also meetups, right?
Yep.
Meetups are a great place to go to learn a new technology and at least kind of get the concepts, the fundamentals. And while you're there, if you'll come out of your shell and shake some hands with some people and get some names, get some contact information, then that way, hey, when you've got a question, maybe they'll hit you up and
and while you're out of your shell, maybe you can write a review about the about the meetup.
I hear about it all the time where someone goes to the Go meetup and, they go a couple weeks in a row. And then next thing you know, that guy that they've been talking to is like, hey, we've got a position and I know you're, still starting out, but I can tell, I like how you think and I think you should come work in Go.
Yeah. So, there's definitely a lot of avenues to do it. But I think the key takeaway from this is you can't just sit down and read a book. You have to put your hands on the keyboard and actually try and do something. If you don't do it, even if you create your own little mini project to do something, you got to struggle through it because everything that people show you in demos looks so easy. And then you sit down and do it, and you're like, wait a second, they didn't tell me about that.
Right.
So wait a minute, you're saying there's something to Apple's demo of Swift?
I actually want to get my hands on Swift.
Yeah, it's pretty. It looks like Link to me.
Yeah, it's faster than Objective-C, man.
So wait, all this stuff we're talking about, is anyone thinking about switching to Swift? Is that what's going on here?
No.
We've all got Apple computers. We should think about it.
This goes back to why I would recommend Java, though. With Java, you're going to have that cross-platform portability, and with Swift, at the moment, you're not. Mm-hmm. So would you want to recommend someone a platform that they're locked into?
Well, you could go with Adobe Air for that matter. You could. It's cross-platform.
Hey, 2000 called. They want their Air back.
Yeah.
People still use it for mobile development.
Yeah, I know.
So I don't know, the cross-platform thing is huge for me, and it's actually really frustrating. Xamarin is something that I'm really interested in, and actually we're all headed to a meetup.
That's right. Speaking of meetups.
Yeah, we're actually headed to a meetup tomorrow night on Xamarin, and pretty excited about it. The only downside is it's fairly expensive, right? If you want to deploy to 2 different platforms, you're looking at some cash.
Yeah, but how much would you be willing to pay if you were, to basically not have to spend the next 6 months working in Java?
Or Objective-C, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, gosh.
Depending on your application, if you're willing to take the hit for that license cost might be nothing in comparison to the time that
saved.
it might take to rewrite your application in Objective-C or in Java and have a C# version if you wanted to be in every app store. So
yeah,
but if you're writing the 400th Flappy Birds clone, then maybe you don't want to spend that money.
Yeah, but if you actually have a business case for it, it makes a lot of sense. You write one code base, and then it compiles across all platforms natively. That's the big thing, natively.
My only thing, though, is that I wish that it was more accessible to the developers.
The individuals.
That's the problem. Is there is a free version of it, but there were some restrictions, and some limitations as to what you can get away with the free version.
Now, we've talked about a lot of stuff tonight. We've talked about JavaScript, Xamarin, Java, C#, Go. One thing that we've talked about a little bit before is wide versus deep. We had Vlad on the show a while back, and we've talked to him about this too. And he's more of a kind of a deep kind of guy. He wants to go in and really learn something and just kind of feel it in his soul. Whereas I tend to be more of a kind of a fan of wide. I want to play around with all sorts of different stuff, and I feel like playing around with that new stuff gets me new perspectives on the things that I kind of go deep on. So what are you guys thinking about that?
Yeah, from my background, wide was the nature of the beast because it was it came from more of a services background. So you always had the challenge of picking up something new, whether it be hardware, software, whether it's server application or language, there was always new challenges there that you were being presented with to pick up something new. So, in that, in a services background, wide is just the de facto standard.
Yeah.
And for me too, I spent a long time, like too long working in Cold Fusion. Now that's basically, kind of dried up in a big way. And so I think if I had gone deep on that and, really committed myself, and, that would have been a very bad thing. So for me, part of it's just kind of being safe. And so I think it's good to go a little deep. And so,
Knock, knock.
who's there?
2000.
Whatever. I also
Adobe was ruling the world.
Yeah, I also came from Cold Fusion, which is probably why I like JavaScript a lot, because it's another, doesn't care about types. But on the wide versus deep going into a language or technologies, I also prefer the wide, because I like working on back end processes. I like dealing with databases. I like messing with the UI. I like it all. And the only way to really do that, I don't ever want to be in a position where they're like, "Hey, you're working on this form over here." Really? Seriously? That's what I'm doing. And so, I love performance, right? And you can eke performance out of every little piece. So, like, you can go to the database side and you can squeak a little bit of performance out of that, and you can go to your UI and enhance things. And I just, and much like Joe said, I feel like there are definitely, you need experts in technologies, like PeopleSoft people. They're going to have jobs for a long time to come. If you specialize in Salesforce, you're probably going to have a job for a long time to come. But I also feel that if you're that guy that has a broad knowledge of things, that's when you become the architect. If you're very deep on one thing and not everything, it's hard to become an architect.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that you do have to have an understanding. I remember, many years ago, there was a friend of mine who was, he had his language preference, and he was willing to change jobs for that language. And I remember thinking at the time, and I even commented to him that, I didn't have that same opinion, that I was willing to, write in like a C# today and a Java tomorrow or whatever. It only because the language to me that you were writing in, it wasn't who I was so much as that language was just another tool in the toolbox that I used. Now, do I have my preference? Oh, absolutely. And I'm sure that anyone can guess what that might be. But
yeah, but kind of at the same time, like, do I regret that month I spent, hot and heavy on Python and then forgot about 2 years later because I never touched it again? Was that a waste of time? Well, maybe, But at the same time, if you go deep on something, you do get diminished returns for that investment. Each hour that you put into something you've been doing for 10 years, how much are you really getting out of that hour?
Yeah, that's a good point.
I've definitely been, like Prolog, for example. Am I going to find a use case for that? No.
But I say, I know for at least me, when I'm working on something and they tell me that I have to use different technology, I enjoy solving problems.
Yes.
And I enjoy solving them in a way that works now and for people who are going to come in behind me as well, right?
I mean, that's why we got into this, right? Was because the fascination of like trying to solve the problem and making this work, right?
Yeah. I mean, as most everybody knows who listens to this podcast now, that we both, we know our technologies, but we also try to become better at them, right? So we're craftsmen, but we are ultimately always trying to solve a problem. We're always trying to either enhance or make things better in some way. And so that's why the technology or the language to me is almost secondary, and that's why I don't mind going wide. I'd rather be able to solve the problem with the tools available. And
So let me ask this then: how do you draw the line? How do you know that? Like, when do you think to yourself, you know what, I'm going too deep, it's time that I like try to pick up something else? Or when do you think to yourself, you know what, I've gone too wide, I need to pick something and dig into it more?
So I would say there's this notion of like a T-shaped person or T-shaped developer, and that's where you have a deep specialization.
Because we're all skinny.
But
that's what you
also
meant, right?
So it's basically wide and deep. And so it's kind of like, for me, I think like, let's spend the time in the day job going deep, day in, day out. That's a great place for that. You focus on kind of one area, but in your own time, when your own side projects and the user groups, go out and do the weird stuff, see what's out there, bring some perspective back. And so for me, it's all about doing the kind of, day jobby stuff in the day and then the weird stuff at night.
Yeah, I could see that. I don't have as much time at night now that I have kids. I know days were different when I didn't have kids, but
So how much time do you spend in your free time doing Java? Or
Java. No, I said the weird, cool stuff.
Or Jython, or Go, or
Oh, now the Go and the Ruby and the messing around with design patterns. I don't know. It's in the hobby range, probably somewhere in the 10 hours. Now, unfortunately, I never actually finished anything, so it doesn't really work out too well for me. But
that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, becoming familiar with these type things doesn't necessarily mean that you're creating the next great application, right? It means that you are putting your hands on the keyboard, seeing what they're all about.
Right, but I will say the things that I actually have finished have paid massive dividends.
Okay.
So it's just like, man, if I had, 30% less projects, but I finished that 60%, then I think my life would be a lot better.
Yeah, I could see that.
So I mean, that was some good advice though as to how to go wide and deep. But
When
the question is like when
How
do
do
you
you know?
self-evaluate?
So I'll say like the cold fusion thing that he brought up a little while ago. At one point, I looked around and I was like, "Oh wow, there's this is a job market in Atlanta that's actually fairly hot for technology, but yet there's 3 buildings in a 50-mile radius that have this technology. It's time to do something else, and so that's one way, right? Economic change or environmental change with the technology stack that you're working on, and then the other thing too is like." To me, once you get bored, then that's time to evaluate what else you need to look at, right? Like, if you are bored with what you're working on, you need to have a passion and a drive for what you're doing. So that is probably also a good indicator that you either need to go deeper so that you have a better understanding and maybe can craft your stuff better, or you go wider and expand your technology stack so that you're dabbling in things that pique your interest again.
Yeah, I think that's the right answer is when you get bored. That's how you're.
So it's not necessarily time-based.
Right. Yeah. So when you just start thinking, it's time to move on. Maybe you end up kind of changing where that specialty lies, or maybe that kind of specialty ends up kind of fading away.
I guess I was thinking about it more from the point of view of like a Mad Libs fill in the blank. If you haven't programmed in a new language in X amount of time, you're too deep.
I don't subscribe to that.
Yeah.
Time wise for me, it doesn't matter. It's more about interest and market. Pretty much that's how I'm looking at it, right? Because if you have a job, a lot of people get into programming either because they think they're going to make a lot of money or because they like to problem solve. It's usually one of the two. Either which way, if you run out of problems to solve because your technology disappears, then you haven't done what you need to do to go wide enough.
The only problem that I have with the bored theory though is that you could remain not bored for a long time.
Right. This is me personally.
And which just makes you too deep.
But not is
so
that
if you wanted
Does
to
it?
yeah, I don't
to
know.
be T-shaped.
I don't know. I think if you're still excited and having fun solving new problems, then at that point it's not the technology that you're having fun with; it's the solving problems. And I think maybe that's your T is solving the problems, not necessarily the technology.
Right. And also
Okay, so you're redefining wide then as not being like technical,
Right.
then.
Yeah, maybe your vertical is solving line of business problems or like 3D graphics or whatever it is. It's not necessarily a technology or a language.
I think once you hit that complacency, so some people may not get bored, but some people might become complacent. Like they just know what to expect, right? As soon as you hit that, then pretty much you should start reevaluating what you're doing, whether you need to look at other technology stacks or go deeper into what you're doing. But once you become where it's like almost cruise control, then it's time to kick it up a notch, whether you go wider or whether you go further down into what you've already got.
So what if your day jobs just kind of got erased and you were out there in the wild and you had some sort of new project and you got to do anything you want, and basically for that month you got to pick whatever technology, whatever project
Race
you
car
wanted
driver.
in the technology field. And what would you do?
Dang.
No, go ahead. What would
I
you do,
was
Joe?
totally
You
serious about race car driver.
you posed the question, Joe. What would you do?
Well, I know video games is always cool. There's a lot of stuff going on in the independent scene, and especially on Steam and Project Greenlight, stuff like that. I always thought it'd be really cool to make a video game, but I also think it could be really boring to be the one making the game rather than playing it. But I also think Go is really exciting right now. Also, there's a lot of stuff going on in JavaScript, and while I don't really like JavaScript too much, it'd be awesome to be able to participate and like do these things that are user-facing and kind of have real projects that people can use rather than just libraries.
About you?
Oh, and hardware. Oh my gosh! Sorry, I just got to say Raspberry Pi. The what you call it? The the $35 Linux computer. That's freaking awesome. You can hook up machines and do things in the real world.
I
think if I had to define like basically like where if I wasn't where I was, like what might be something of interest, I kind of think like how to describe like drones and robots, like that kind of automation. I think it sounds pretty neat.
Mine, I think it would be
swarms of drones.
Right.
That's cool stuff. We need to leave some YouTube links on that. I think mine would be home automation.
Oh, very cool.
Because I totally dig like home audio video stuff, and the whole idea that you walk into a room and say, all right, I want to watch a movie, lights dim, your projector screen comes down, your freaking curtains slide closed, like that whole idea, and then like audio, but then the control surface for that. I think that's where there's a lot of things that could be done, because everybody has iPads and smartphones and all that.
Have you seen The Ring?
The Ring?
Yeah, you can wear like a ring and kind of do hand motions.
The movie?
Not the movie.
Oh
you do these
God.
cool kind of hand motions, and that'll know, like, turn the light on, turn the light off, whatever. And it's just this ring, so it's unobtrusive. You don't have to go fishing in your pocket for it.
Great. More gestures you gotta do.
That would only
Yeah.
work for non-sports fans, by the way. Your lights are going off, your projector's flickering on and off. Yeah, that'd be a problem. But no, so I think that's what I'd do. I don't really know, but I don't know what language
Just
it would be.
imagining anyone choosing that ring. It's on their left hand. Like for right-handed people. Never mind.
Yeah, it doesn't
Bad
make any
thought.
sense. All right, so yeah. Anyways, I think that's what I do, and I don't know what I would probably try something like Xamarin or
Yeah.
one of the cross-platform ones, because I'd want to be able to do it on like a tablet of some sort or a phone. So that's probably where I'd go.
Interesting, you guys didn't say mobile.
Well, no,
Well,
that's
that's
kind of
what
what
I
I'm
was
getting
thinking.
at.
With
Is that,
Xamarin.
yeah,
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah. That's why Xamarin would be there. Maybe
Dude,
something
my
like
drones would
App
totally be
Accelerator.
mobile. Are you kidding?
Oh yeah,
totally
you'd
mobile.
have to have that on a tablet. Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, that's cool. Oh, another one that I'd probably be hot in that you were talking about with the drones is I like the whole idea that now like movies, people rent these like quadricopters and put cameras on them and get these flyby scenes. I would totally love to write some interfaces for that kind of stuff. So yeah,
Yeah, they're actually using those quadcopters for a lot of stuff.
yeah. I mean, they're replacing what used to be thousands of dollars to fly around a helicopter to do the same type thing.
Yeah.
You know, doing it with a battery.
Flyovers
pack.
of just about anything.
Yeah, pretty cool stuff. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much. Was there anything else we missed with this? These were kind of topics that just came up throughout the week.
Yeah, I
And,
think it's been a pretty good water cooler discussion so far.
yeah. I mean, these are all things that we were like, oh, we need to write that down. That'd be a good discussion. So hopefully you guys got something out of this.
Yeah, and if you did or didn't, leave us a comment or, give us a review or something. Let us know.
Oh yeah. Oh, also, first off, Outlaw has a killer resource.
Yeah, so, Joe had introduced me to Programmer Humor on the subreddit, which how I missed that one, I don't know. But I strongly recommend you head over to Reddit and find the Programmer Humor subreddit. But while looking through that, I stumbled upon this Tumblr called lifeofasoftwareengineer.tumblr.com. And oh my God, is there some comedy gold on that account.
I was in tears.
Oh, absolutely. It's a bunch of animated GIFs. It's just absolutely
Wait,
fantastic.
they're animated what?
GIFs is for choosy GIFers.
They're GIFs? Animated
GIFs are for choosy
They are-
programmers.
The point being is that you need to head over to lifeofasoftwareengineer.tumblr.com, and if you are not in tears laughing at one of those, then there might be something wrong with you. You need to have
You have no soul.
your heart checked. There's something. You got some medical problems going on, because I promise you, there is some comedy gold.
Yeah,
on
go
that
here.
site.
You will see sloths. You will see Eddie Murphy. You will see Simpsons and weird Russian cars driving backwards. I mean,
What-
you're going to like this. Trust us.
You'll see Gandalf. Oh man.
My favorite was the Indiana Jones one that we tweeted out.
Oh, about mocking. Yeah.
Oh my god, that
Yeah.
one was just so hilarious.
So we've tweeted our favorites.
Yes, so you definitely, if you want some of these random humorous things that come up, you can follow us on Twitter. Cause,
Yeah, every now and then you need to take a break and laugh.
yeah.
I'll give you a taste. I'm looking at one right now. It's titled "Getting a Compiler Warning," and it's got a police officer holding up his hand like a stop sign, letting this motorcyclist know, don't go this way. And the motorcyclist zooms by and gives the cop a high five. So that's just a taste of what you'll be seeing on the site. It's awesome. Go there now.
It's beyond.
Stop the car.
I just saw that one.
Pull over. Get on your phone. lifeofasoftwareengineer.tumblr.com.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Um,
That's it for resources we like, really.
yeah. That we didn't have much on that this week. But
Yeah, well, I mean, there wasn't really a lot that applied to this week's topic.
Nah.
Yeah, but there's a lot of really funny things on that website.
Yeah,
Oh my
you got to
God.
go
It's a
there.
gold mine.
Oh wait, I will say one other resources. Outlaw turned me on to this one this week. It's also from Reddit. It's battle stations. Oh man, we
Yeah,
talked.
Alan had never experienced the underbelly of people's incredible workstations and gaming stations that they've built.
And they call them battle stations.
And,
It is so apropos.
Yeah.
Yeah, I said this to my wife, and I just assumed she was going to love it. And I got home, and I was like, "Hey, you didn't write me back. How'd you like battle stations?" And she just said, "You're not getting 6 monitors."
But if you really want to torture yourself, what you need to do is, so there is the Battle Stations subreddit that Alan's referring to, so you can head over to Reddit and look for that. But go do yourself a favor and go to Google and search for best of Reddit battle
The
stations.
top 5. Oh,
And
man.
oh my god.
Oh, they're
There's like one of the top results that came back. I think it might have been the top result that came back, and it's got like top 10 battle stations that were listed on Reddit, and I think it's kind of old. That story might be maybe
It's
a
old.
year old.
Yeah.
But still,
They're beautiful.
Oh my god.
You'll want them. You'll want all of them, and you'll want a room in each room of your house.
To believe
will
that
want
like
to be
this
lit.
is the computer that some people just like come home to
Yeah.
is incredible.
Oh man, it's truly fantastic stuff. So yes, apparently I've been lost on the interwebs for a long time and found that. So
It also makes me want to like program like a battle station simulator where you could just kind of like create your dream setup and hardware and like take screenshots of it and post it on the internet.
here comes a SketchUp article.
Yeah, there's my next startup idea.
Yep. All right, so now we're getting into the tips of the week.
Yep, and I get to go first because I was the first one to write this down. But Glyphy is an awesome free tool for making things like flowcharts, UML diagrams, wireframes, network charts, sitemaps, all sorts of stuff. And it's only really free for kind of limited type things. Like you can't really have a lot of private graphs and stuff like that. And there's some cheap accounts. And this is an Atlassian product too, so that's awesome. But Glyphy.org.com.
I think it was .com.
.com. Yeah, Glyphy.com.
.org.info.
And Glyphy, GLI.
Glyphy.package.helloworld.
Yeah, spelling Glyphy is a little weird. I guess I should spell it. It's
Yeah.
GLIFFY.com.
Yep. All right, so
All right, so with that, we went to another meetup. When was that? Last week for
yeah.
SpecFlow, and got a really great presentation there and introduction into SpecFlow. So if you haven't heard of SpecFlow, it's it's both a plugin to Studio as well as an add-on into your project that will allow you to. Well, let me start. The goal is to allow the business owners to be able to define the criteria for your application that can then later become your unit test. So it allows the business owners to write things in a given when-then type format, and using SpecFlow, you can translate that quite nicely into your unit test. And then there was also some tools where in the presentation that we were given, where using Yada.js they were able to take the same specification file, and have it work for both test cases in JavaScript as well as C#. And based off of that specification file, it's I forgot to mention this part, but it's generating the structure of your unit tests for you. So you're only filling in the blanks of your unit tests.
Yeah, it was pseudo.
So it was
Pseudo readable English type business cases that got turned into unit tests. It was really neat.
Yeah, there's a Pluralsight video out there as well that talks about I think it was called Test First development. That and during that they talked about SpecFlow, but you can find more information about it at specflow.org.
Yep. And my tip of the week is actually a SQL Server Management Studio tip that a lot of people don't know about. If you have a table, and a lot of times you're trying to figure out what columns are in the table. Actually, I'll leave 2 tips on this because they're both kind of related.
That's because autocomplete doesn't work.
Autocomplete sometimes works.
This is because there's no describe function.
Yes, this is actually the kind of trick for describe. So what you can do is you can highlight the table name in your editor and then hold down Alt and then push F1, and it will actually bring up a list of all your columns and some descriptive information about the table. And then another little quick tip about SQL Server that you can do in Management Studio is, say that you want to do a select, or you want to do an insert into a table, and you don't want to have to type out all the column names on your insert into. You can actually go over to the left where you expand your table, and then there's that columns folder. If you drag that columns folder over into your editor, it will automatically give you a comma delimited list of all the columns in that table. So it will basically copy those into your editor for you wherever you place them.
Nice.
So 2 little tips for working in Management
I
Studio.
just always use the right click, select top 1000, and then refactor that query.
You can do that, but this is actually much quicker. Yeah. You don't have to refactor anything. It just brings it in. So those are my tips.
All right. So with that, we'll be putting the links in the show notes, and be sure to subscribe to us on iTunes and Stitcher. And we'd really appreciate your reviews as well. That really goes a long way to help us out and help us find new listeners.
And again, if you do leave us a review, we'll mention you on the podcast. And just, again, leave your preferred method of shout out. Visit us at codingblocks.net, where you can find the show notes, the examples, discussion, and more. And this will be www.codingblocks.net/episode 12.
Yep. And you can also send your feedback, questions, and rants to comments@codingblocks.net. And make sure to follow us on Twitter at codingblocks, where you can see us linking to many funny Life of Software Engineer posts.
Absolutely. And we do also do other things like that.
Yep.
No, it's mostly just
It's not as good
reposting to
as-
Life
right.
Software.
It's awesome.
Yeah, so that's it, guys.